with it being International Women's Month, I have been doing some thinking. And also with me focusing on the stories of women, not only in my interview episodes, but also in my solo episodes, which you may or may not have seen, where I do a segment called What's Her Story? I believe that we all have stories that are worth sharing, and we're all similar in some sort of way. However, I think that for a lot of women, we all just understand something about each other that men just don't. And so I've been thinking about things, including just the history of holidays and the naming of schools and statues and all those things. And also with many recent allegations coming out about people who have schools and holidays named after them, and that those things have been changed now that these allegations have come out. I have just been very disheartened and discouraged. This all started with the recent allegations of Cesar Chavez and how Cal State San Marcos, which is where I went, literally had a statue of him that's been covered and a holiday that kids took off that has now been reconsidered. And so I thought to myself, well, there's lots of schools that are named after men. What about women? I thought I might do some research and give you some numbers on the amount of women versus men that are in that field. So I took some notes and I want to make sure that I get all this correct. In regional studies, 5-to-1 schools, that's a 5-to-1 ratio of schools named after men versus women. As for holidays, out of the 2,600 public holidays, less than 10% of holidays honor women. 0 federal holidays are named after women. Now for statues depicting historical women in major cities, 2 to 3% of them are depicting women. Now in this next statistic, when I say real women, I mean women that actually existed in history and not women like Greek goddesses. So in the US, statues of real women are at about 6%, and statues of men are 94%. Out of roughly 5,500 outdoor bronze portraits, fewer than 40% are real women. Now, I looked up, are there women that have schools named after them or holidays? And yes, there were schools and holidays that are named after women. And I was also curious to see, okay, I understand that men and women both do bad things and they are put up for crimes and we all do horrible things. I totally understand that. And so what are the percentage of women that have had those holidays or school names or statues rescinded or taken down? The biggest name that has had changes made to the nomenclature of things was Queen Victoria, based on her history with slave trade, which is a very understandable reason to remove her from things. And so after thinking about this, I just got really discouraged, and I remembered my reason of why I interview women and want them to make sure that they know that their stories are important. I mentioned earlier that in my solo episodes, I've discussed historical women's stories because there are heroines both in our modern time and in our historical time that are very deserving of school names, statues, holidays, all those things. If you remember back to my solo episodes, I've mentioned women like Jovita Idar, Patsy Mink. One of the women that I literally discussed in my solo episode was Dolores Huerta. And if you've been keeping up on the story about the allegations with Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta co-founded the United Farm Workers Union alongside Chavez and is the person who brought up the sexual allegations against him. Now, I've been doing research on this as a journalist. I think it's important to do your own research as well. And so I was just curious about it. I was seeing stories on the news. I had talked about Dolores in short in my episode, saying details like she led strikes and negotiated labor contracts for people in the Farm Workers Union. And then in 2012, she actually received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and which is, I think, is an incredible feat. And yes, you should be honored in that way. When reading more about her story, she had said that she kept quiet for 6 decades because she feared that the union was the only way to secure rights for farm workers and their families. And she feared that exposing the truth about Chavez would destroy the movement that she spent her life building, which, as you can probably imagine, is a very terrifying thought, which is why a lot of victims of sexual abuse and sexual crimes stay silent because of fear of retaliation. And so, anyways, all of this stuff has just got me thinking that now more than ever, women deserve to be heard and seen. I think that other women would agree that we don't need to have holidays or schools or statues after us, but the difference in number, I think, of those things is just what makes me so sad, and just makes me hopeful for the future that there will be more opportunities to keep stories of women, both in our history and in modern times, continuing so that our daughters and our granddaughters and our great-granddaughters can continue to be encouraged by the women of the past.